Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to today's training on the exclusive right to sell listing agreement and the exclusive right to lease listing agreement. Today, we're going to review both listing agreements, how to fill them out, and what to pay attention to in these listing agreements and lease agreements. Guys, if you have any questions, please feel free. Ask questions as much as you want to. You can either unmute yourselves and ask questions, or you can type in the chat. And we are also recording our session. I will share this recording inside of our YouTube channel as soon as we're finished with our training today. All right, so of course, we are logged into Form Simplicity, and this is where we find all of our forms. We are going to practice on filling out the exclusive right of sale listing agreement first, and then we will go into the exclusive right to lease listing agreement as well. We do have other classes coming up in the next several weeks where we will go over the as-is contract for sale and purchase, and we have other classes that we will go over the contract to lease and the residential lease agreement when you are representing a tenant. All right, so let's go ahead and get started inside of Form Simplicity. Of course, Form Simplicity is one of your tools that you have inside of your resource panel, and you'll see it right over here. We'll log in and we have access to all the forms. So we're going to click on blank forms right here. And when you're clicking on blank forms, you're going to find the blank forms library from the Florida Realtors. And you're also going to find packages. We have packages right here where it says forms packages. So as an office, we've already organized the forms that you'll need for any type of transaction. So if you are representing a buyer, you would choose the buyer package. If you are looking to represent a client in a commercial transaction, you will select a commercial package. Then the exclusive right to sell is right here, and the exclusive right to lease is right here. So when we open exclusive right to sell, you will see the forms necessary in a listing situation. So right here we have the exclusive right of sale, listing agreement, transaction broker. This is the actual listing agreement you will need to fill out and have the seller sign it when you are taking in a listing. You have here the modification to a listing agreement. That's the form needed whenever you need to modify maybe the price of the property, or in the event that the seller wants to pause the listing or maybe even cancel the listing, then you will need a modification to the listing agreement. And then there's other forms in here that are sometimes used in a transaction. Then you'll have the seller's disclosure for a condominium and the seller's disclosure for a residential sale. We will go over the seller's disclosure and the modification to the listing agreement as well. All right. So these are the forms in a situation when we represent the seller. We are going to use the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. All right. So I am actually going to begin pretending that we're going to list a property, and I'm going to click on home, and we're going to go ahead and create a new transaction. All right, so I'm going to take you through the steps on Form Simplicity on how to create a new transaction, and then we're going to review the form. So we're going to click on starting a new transaction right here, and we're just going to go ahead and put in here the address of a property. All right, we're going to put in the address of a property, and on the right-hand side, we're going to name the transaction exactly the same as the property address. For property type, we are going to select residential, and for transaction type, we are going to select listing. Right, then we're going to go all the way down here. We're going to click on create a transaction. All right, so once your transaction is created, now it's time for us to upload the forms. So right here we have forms packages. We're going to just open here. We're going to go ahead and select the exclusive right to sell. And we're going to uncheck everything. We don't need everything here. I am going to include the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. I'm also going to include the modification to the listing agreement, and we're going to go ahead and include the seller's property disclosure for a residential home. Let's click on add to a transaction. And then we're going to click on add right here, continuing to add the forms. Now you're going to see under forms the three selected forms from the package. All right, so before we actually get into the form, we want to maybe import some data into this. So to import data into your transaction and then onto your form, you can go here to where it says import property data. We're going to go ahead and click there. And then we are not going to import MLS data. We're going to look for the data from the public records. So for public records, you're going to select tax search. And then the house number is 1020. And then the street name is Obispo. And then this is going to be in zip code 33134. And then this is in the county of Miami-Dade. All right, so we're going to go ahead and enter the address of the property just like this. No need to enter street or avenue or north or southwest. Just enter the house number, the street name, the zip code, the county, and then click on find tax data. If you are going to list a condo with a unit number, then you'll enter the unit number underneath the space for unit. All right, so here we have the property. We're going to go ahead and click on select. We are going to be importing the address of the property, the folio number, and the legal description onto the listing agreement, plus the name of the owner. All right, click on save information to the transaction. Continue saving the information. Now we imported all the information. If you already know what you're going to list the property for, then come over here to listing price and put in the listing price. So let's say that we're going to list the property for $2 million even. All right, so putting in here $2 million. We're going to click on save data. And now let's go ahead and proceed to open the listing agreement. All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and open the listing agreement. By the way, you can always go to the packages if you just need to download the listing agreement. You can always go to the packages, select the agreement on the left, and just click on download if you want to download a copy of the listing agreement in blank. All right, but if you are going to work the listing agreement, then it is just much easier for us to work it inside of Form Simplicity. All right, so here we have the first line, right? It says seller. That's the name of the seller. So you guys populated the information from public record. That is the name of the seller. If you want to double check, guys, you can always double check by using IMAP. All right, those of us that are familiar with IMAP, it is a public record system. If you go here and you click on IMAP and you put in 1020 Obispo Avenue for the address, let's go ahead and do that. All right, what just happened here? I'm in the foreclosure section. Let's go to tax search. That property is not in foreclosure. All right, let's do this again. And you will see Samit Kumar is the owner of the property. All right, so Samit Kumar. All right, so it's actually going with the last name first. So let's do a little adjustment here. Perfect. All right, so this second line here where it says broker, it has our name, Elite Ocean View Realty. You guys can leave it like that. If you want to put your name in front of Elite Ocean View Realty, you can do that as well, but you are not the broker. So we just recommend that you leave it like this, Elite Ocean View Realty, LLC. Okay, so right here, authority to sell property. Seller gives broker the exclusive right to sell the real estate property, and then you're gonna enter a date range. So if we're gonna get this listing agreement signed today, then we're gonna put in today's date, and this is set to expire maybe 6 months from now or a year from now. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put this listing agreement for a year. You guys want to at least try and get a listing agreement for 6 months. Okay. Try not to accept a listing agreement for less than 6 months. You're going to be putting in a lot of work. And if the property doesn't sell, then you really just wasted your time and money on marketing a property that didn't sell. So at least try and give yourself 6 months, if not a full year on the listing agreement. All right, so now that we have our date range, we have here the street address, we have the legal description, and then right here, personal property, including appliances that are going to be included with the sale. We've gone ahead and put in all appliances. Now, if the property is also being sold with furniture, right, you can always come over here and just put in and all furniture. Any personal property that's going to be included in the sale of the home, you're going to put it in right here, line 17, which is letter B, personal property, including all appliances. All appliances is already there. And then if you need to include all furniture, then you will do and all furniture. All right, so C, occupancy. It talks about whether the property is occupied or not. So it says property is or is not currently occupied by tenant. If it is occupied, then you need to write down here, when does the tenant lease expire? All right, so let's say it is occupied and it expires on June 30th. Then you're gonna say is occupied and it expires on June 30th. All right, price and terms. This property is offered for sale. And then you have the price of $2 million dollars that we entered it before. Financing terms that are going to be considered are going to be cash and conventional. We're going to remove VA and FHA. This is a $2 million dollar property. FHA is probably not going to cover this type of financing. So let's just go with cash and conventional. Or if there's any other terms that are going to be considered, like seller financing, or assumption of mortgages, you're going to go ahead and go through letter B and find the term that you would like to consider. In most cases, it's going to be cash or conventional. Number four talks about the broker obligation. So our obligation to our client. Broker agrees to make diligent and continued efforts to sell the property in accordance with this agreement until a sales contract is pending on the property. This includes, except when not in seller's best interest, cooperating and communicating with other brokers and making the property available for showings. All right, so as a listing agent, this is your job, what to do, what you're going to be doing. Then number five talks about the MLS, multiple listing service. There are some uh, instances where the listing agent and the seller negotiate to maybe not show the property on the MLS. There is a way for the seller to opt out from showing the property on the MLS. All right, so right here, broker authority, seller authorizes broker to, and right here is public marketing includes. So flyers, signs, digital marketing, websites, broker website displays, things like that. Public marketing also includes marketing the property to real estate agents outside of the broker's office. That's how we do it with the MLS, right? And then you see over here where it says seller does not authorize broker to display the property on the MLS. For some strange reason, the seller does not want to list the property on the MLS. Then they're going to check here, right? And then they're going to initial down here. All right, so they're going to check here and they're going to initial down here. Any questions on that? I mean, I think that when we take a listing agreement, the idea is to list it on the MLS. But there are some cases where the seller does not want to go on the MLS. All right, guys. So right here, check if applicable, use a lockbox system to show and access the property. We have it checked. Of course, you guys, if they're not going to use a lockbox, if the property is occupied and they do not feel safe using a lockbox, then just don't put a lockbox. It's simple. Seller obligations. So this talks about their obligations as a seller. Basically talking about making the home available, making sure the home is nicely picked up and that you can demonstrate the home or show the property. All right. So it talks about here cooperating with the broker, providing the broker keys to the home, inform the broker before leasing or refinancing the home. All right. And they're going to go ahead and identify the broker and any home hardness from losses, damages, or costs, expenses of this nature. So all of this is part of the seller's obligation to communicate with the broker. All right, then we move into compensation. All right, so compensation is very important. Remember that compensation is never going to be shown on the MLS listing. So, and also remember that compensation is negotiable. All right, compensation is negotiable. You'll see it on the listing agreement. So, number 8 talks about the compensation that will be paid to you as the listing brokerage. All right, so seller will compensate broker as follows or as specified below. Okay, and then A, all right, we've entered an aggressive 4%. All right. In most cases, you've already talked to the seller, and let's say that you come to an agreement that the listing is going to pay out 5% total in compensation. So, what do you want to make as a listing brokerage? So, the owner's paying out 5% compensation, and they agree to split the compensation in half, then you're going to make 2.5%. If the compensation, the total compensation paid out is 6%, then you can put in here 3%. 3% for you, and then drop down here to number 10, 3% in letter B for the buyer agent. In the event that the owner says we're only paying 3% to you and nothing to the buyer broker, then in number 10, compensation to the buyer's broker, you're going to select letter C. Letter C says no compensation will be offered to the buyer's broker. All right. Now let's go ahead and review letter number 8. We chose letter A. Letter A states that 3% of the total purchase price, right, plus $495, which is our brokerage transaction fee, will be paid no later than the date of the closing specified in the sales contract. However, closing is not a prerequisite for the broker's fee being earned. So 3% plus the 495 transaction broker fee will be paid at closing. Letter B states that you can put in here either a numeric value, so maybe like a flat fee, or a percentage of the consideration, right, paid for an option at the time of an option contract, right? You're not going to do letter B. And then right here, letter C, again, a numeric value or percentage of the gross lease value for the leasing fee. Now, this is in this agreement. However, there is an exclusive right to lease listing agreement, which we will cover. So again, if you're listing the property for sale, we are going to select letter A, and then we're going to put in a percentage of the total purchase price plus the 495 that is going to be paid at closing. All right. Drop down to number 10. Number 10, letter A says seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to the buyer's broker in the amount of a percentage of the purchase price or a flat fee. Now, letter A means that the brokerage, the listing brokerage, will then have to cut a check to the buyer broker after the closing has occurred for their percentage. We don't want that. We want the seller, all right, to pay the buyer broker at closing. So that's why we select letter B. Seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to the buyer's broker from the seller in the amount of 3% of the purchase price. This compensation will be set forth in a separate written agreement between seller and buyer's broker. That agreement is called the compensation agreement. So I will show you what the compensation agreement looks like. Okay. All right. So checking letter B, and then let's say that we took the listing for 6% and we're gonna divide it in half. Then it's 3% and also 3%. Now, guys, it's all negotiable. Let's say, for example, the seller says, you know what, you take 4% and offer the buyer agency 2%. Then you do that. 4% for you and 2% for the buyer broker. All right, it's all negotiable. Any questions on the compensation? All right, we're good. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and move on. Number 11, brokerage relationship. Broker will act as a transaction broker. This is why it's important for us to always use the listing agreement transaction broker. This means that you, as the listing agent, can also represent a buyer. So if a buyer comes to you unrepresented without any realtor representation, then you can also represent them. If you were to choose a listing agreement that is single agency, then you would not be able to represent a buyer that comes to you. I mean, you can, but you would have to transition into a transaction broker. So without having to transition to a transaction broker, you can just use the transaction broker listing agreement. All right, conditional terms, dispute and resolution, miscellaneous, and then in the additional terms, we've already written for you that the seller will pay a $495 transaction broker fee at closing to Elite Ocean View Realty. So that comes out of the seller's proceeds at closing. Down here is where the seller's signature will go. And then you are the authorized sales associate. So when you're taking a listing, we do not need our broker's signature. All we need is your signature. So you will sign where it says authorized sales associate, enter the date. You will also initial everywhere where it says authorized sales associate, and you will make sure that the seller initials everywhere where it says seller. All right, simply put, guys, this is your listing agreement to sell a property. All right, do not enter the property in the MLS without having a fully executed listing agreement. We will ask for the listing agreement, and if you cannot provide us with the listing agreement, we will be forced to take the listing off the MLS. All right, any questions on the listing agreement? Nope. All right, let's go ahead and close it out. I'm going to go ahead and close it with saving. Let's save it, save and close. All right, let's say for instance, we're also going to lease this property. I'm going to go ahead and show you the lease. So we're going to click on add forms. I'm going to open up the exclusive right to lease agreement. And I'm going to go ahead and just select the exclusive right to lease listing agreement. We're going to go ahead and review this agreement. All right, so let's open it. This is the listing agreement you will use when you represent a landlord who's going to list their property for rent. All right, so once again, you're going to have here the name of the landlord or the owner, right? And the brokerage is Elite Ocean View Realty. Once again, you're going to put in a date range in which you are going to list the property for lease. So we put in here, I put in the wrong date. All right, so right here, we're going to put in today's date. And then here, I'm just going to go ahead and erase this because I made a small little mistake. And let's go a year. All right, so let's go a year. We're going to have this contract for a year. And once again, we have the property address and we have the legal descriptions and any personal property that's going to be included in the lease. Once again, it says all appliances, but let's say that all furniture is going to be included. So you're going to put comma and then put in all furniture. All right. Occupancy, property is not currently occupied. Property is currently occupied by the landlord or tenant. If it's tenant occupied, the lease term expires on which date? So let's say that you are listing the property and it is not occupied. It is vacant. You're going to select is not currently occupied. Very simple. Number three, rental rate terms. All right. This is a bit confusing. You are going to list the property for lease and you're trying to get a tenant to lease the property for 12 months, right? For a year's term. Then you are going to select yearly. And then on the right, you're going to put in the amount of rent that you're going to charge per month. So the amount of rent that you plan on charging per month. Why is it not saving? 7,000. All right. There you go. I know that monthly means that you're seeking monthly payments, but in a listing agreement, this means a yearly lease, this means a month-to-month lease, and this means a weekly lease, right? Like short term. So you're seeking a yearly lease at $7,000 a month. It's not 7,000 times 12. It's yearly lease at $7,000 a month. Okay? And then if it's seasonal, and you're going to put in here seasonal runs from what dates? Advanced rents. All right, so advanced rents, we're going to come here and we're going to ask for $7,000. Actually, we're going to ask for $14,000 in advance rent plus a 1 month security deposit. So basically, right here, we're letting them know that it's the move-in cost is $21,000, right? $7,000 as a security deposit, which is refundable. And then first and last is the advance rents. If you will allow pets, will you charge any pet deposits? All right, so a say refundable pet deposit of $300. All right. Any credit report fees, any other fees, right? Any association application fees, if there is any association application fees, let's go ahead and remove this $100 that you see here. All right, and we're gonna uncheck the other. All right, there are no other fees. All right. When it mentions taxes, or leases that the term is less than 6 months, 6 months or less, are subject to a 14% tax. So instead of being 7,000, it'll be 7,000 plus 14%. Now that's why you see a lot of short-term, like 6 month leases. They go 6 months and 1 day. Once you go 6 months and 1 day, taxes are no longer required to be collected. All right. Obviously, taxes are not required to be collected in a yearly lease. So, you know, line C over here does not apply. If there is an association approval, application must be made within 2 days after the contract to lease is signed. All right, very important, guys. And those of us that have worked with renters before, you know that once you have your contract to lease and there is an association, we need to get this, our tenant applying for the association because HOAs sometimes take several weeks to approve the tenant. And then once again, it talks about broker obligations, what us as a broker, our obligations to the client. And then right here, it talks about the owner obligations and their obligations to us, including having the property available for us to show the property at reasonable times, right? And then number six is the compensation. So let's go to compensation. Brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. You're going to see that on every single contract. All right, that was a huge thing back in last year. For those of us that are brand new realtors, you may not have experienced it. All right, but there are some changes and these commissions are fully negotiable. Owner agrees to compensate broker. And who's the broker? You are, right? So A, amount of compensation. Owner agrees to pay broker the following. Okay, so you have here a percentage of the rent due in each rental period. No. You have over here checked a percentage of the gross value of the lease, right? Or the third option is a percentage of the first month's rent. So if you are going to charge the landlord, say 10% of the gross lease value, then, and you're going to divide it in half, then you're going to put 5% for you, and then drop down to number eight, letter B, 5% of the gross lease value to the tenant broker. If the compensation being offered is 1 month, then you remove this check mark, you remove this 5%, and it's going to be the third option, and you're going to put in here 50% of the first month's rent. Half a month goes to you, and then go to letter or number eight, letter B, remove here this option, and use this option. 50% of the first month's rent will be paid to the tenant brokerage. That's the compensation being offered. Notice once again, letter C says no compensation will be offered to the tenant's broker. All right. So again, that's the compensation for us as the listing brokerage. That would be number six, letter B. Not letter B, sorry, number six. Yeah. Letter A. Letter A. And number eight, letter B. Letter A states that the brokerage, meaning Elite Ocean View Realty, will pay the compensation. No, no, we want the compensation to come directly from the seller's proceeds, or in this case, the landlord's proceeds. Okay. Early termination. I think we didn't even cover early termination in the listing agreement for sale, but there is a clause here for early termination, and you can decide whether you're going to charge anything if the listing agreement is terminated before its expiration date. So right now it's set to zero. We're going to leave it at zero. But let's say that you don't really have a good relationship with this landlord or seller, and you want to protect your, your future expenses in this marketing of the property, then put in $500, $1,000, whatever you want to charge as an early termination. All right, so the additional clauses says the landlord will pay a $95 transaction broker fee at the executed lease to Elite Ocean View Realty. All right. Owner agrees to compensate broker if procured tenant will buy the property during the term of the lease or after the end of the lease for a protection period of 365 days. Commission to be paid at closing will be 6%. So that means that if the tenant decides they want to buy the house during the lease term or for a period of 1 year after the lease has expired, then the commission paid to me will be 6% of that sale. All right. So again, it's something to look at, and especially if this listing agreement also goes with a listing agreement that's for sale, because you will see a lot of properties that are for sale and rent at the same time. All right, that's it. That's your listing agreement for lease. You're going to go ahead and have everyone sign it, including yourself. Once again, you are going to sign where it says authorized sales associate. You are going to initial where it says authorized sales associate. There's no need for our broker to sign this agreement. All right, let's go ahead and save this one as well. Any questions on the exclusive right to lease listing agreement? All right, no questions. Perfect. All right, in the event that you guys need to make any changes to any listing agreement, you're going to use the modification to a listing agreement, which is this one here. We're going to open it and let's go ahead and go over the modification to a listing agreement. In the modification to a listing agreement, you have all these options. All right. So if this listing needs to be canceled before the expiration finishes, right? Then you have the termination date will be, and then you put in the date that you are actually getting the cancellation. So you will put in the termination date. Also, if this listing agreement is going to be extended for another 6 months, then you will do one of these modification to a listing agreement. You will select here whether it's a modification to the exclusive right to lease or the exclusive right to sell, right? So you'll check it and then you will put in the new expiration date to the listing. If the prices of the property or the price of the property or the terms of the sale of the property or of the lease of the property are going to be updated, then you will update here price and terms as well. So once again, if you are going to lower the price of the listing, you must use one of these modifications to the listing agreement and you're going to put in the new price right here. And then you're going to have the seller, right? The owner, seller, sign it, or the landlord, owner, landlord, sign it. And then broker or authorized sales associate. You do not need our broker signature. All you need is your signature. All right, guys, that's the modification to a listing agreement. Let's go ahead and close that out. All right, so let's discuss real quick here the seller's disclosure because it is an important part of a listing. We're going to go ahead and select it and open it up. I want you guys to know that you are very limited as to what you can do in a seller's disclosure. A seller's disclosure is only to be filled out by the seller themselves. So in red, it's going to tell you there's pretty much nothing you can do with the seller's disclosure besides putting in just the address of the property, right? So the seller's disclosure, while it's not required for you to have one to list the property, if a buyer who's interested in the property and is placing an offer on the property requests a seller's disclosure, then you are required to provide one. So only if the buyer requests one. So in order for us to take the listing, I don't need a seller's disclosure. But once we are under contract and the buyer says, please send me the seller's disclosure, we're going to need to provide one. So you might as well get the seller to fill this out. So basically, it's a series of questions about the house, and the answers are yes, no, or I don't know. All right. Questions about the structure and systems and appliances of the home. Questions about termites. Questions about water intrusion, drainage, and flooding. Questions about plumbing. Questions about the roof, pool, hot tub, spas, any sinkholes. Questions about the homeowners association. Questions about the environmental. All right. Questions about any litigation or claims against the home. And then questions over here on the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, or better known as FRIPTA. All right. After the seller has signed it, you are then going to provide a copy of this to the buyer. So the buyer has been informed and they have all of the seller's disclosures on the property. And the buyer's going to also sign this and they're going to send it over to the title company who's doing the closing on the property. All right. An important piece of document here that must be filled out by the seller. Notice how we can't click here. All right. I cannot click here. I can only send this to the seller and have the seller fill it out themselves. Okay, that is your seller's disclosure. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. There's another disclosure called the flood disclosure that I forgot to mention. Let's just go ahead and add that in here. So I'm going to open up blank forms and I'm going to look for flood. And you are going to be adding the flood disclosure, which is this one right here. All right. No, not that one. Sorry. The flood disclosure. It's going to be this one right here. The second one. We're going to add it to the transaction. So they're going to ask you, and it is required now for us to have this document. So they're going to ask you for a flood disclosure. What I mean by they, I mean that once you're under contract, the buyer's going to ask you for a flood disclosure. So let's go ahead and have this signed. Basically, it's the owner and seller has or has not filed a claim with an insurance providing relating to flood damage. Seller has or has not received federal assistance or flood for flood damage to the property. And number three, for the purposes of this disclosure, the term flooding means a general or a temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of the property. All right, so the seller is going to sign this. There's nothing here for the buyer to sign. It's just a disclosure that needs to be delivered to the buyer when they ask for one. All right, so important for us to also include a flood disclosure when taking a listing. All right, let's close that out. That's the flood disclosure. Now, in the listing agreement, we did read something about the compensation agreement. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and show it to you. However, it's not required for us to have a compensation agreement. A compensation agreement is going to be sent to you when an offer is sent. So here's how the situation is going to go. Um, you get a phone call from a listing from an agent representing a buyer and or a tenant, and they say that they have a buyer or tenant who's interested in viewing the property. They may ask you right away, "Hey, is the seller offering any compensation?" And based on our listing agreement, we know that the seller's offering 3%, right? So we know that the seller's offering 3%. Now, when they see the property and they decide to place an offer, they should send you, together with the offer, what's known as a compensation agreement, buyer, seller to buyer broker, right? So I'm going to go ahead and open up the packages here and show you inside of the buyer package the compensation agreement that you're going to receive, which is called the compensation agreement seller to buyer's broker. It's that one right there. I'm going to go ahead and add it to the transaction. And I'm also going to add, just since we're doing this class dual for sale and rental, let me open up the packages and let me go here to the lease package. All right, if you are representing a landlord and you're receiving a contract to lease, they're probably going to send you a contract to lease agreement and then also the compensation agreement, owner listing broker to tenant broker. So that is the compensation agreement that they will use to pretty much make known what the compensation will be. All right. So when you receive an offer to buy the home, okay, you're going to go ahead and receive what's known as the compensation agreement, sellers to buyer broker. And it basically means that buyer broker, Elite Ocean View Realty, you can type your name here if you want to, and the seller, property address, and once again, the seller's broker for a term of, you're probably going to see something like 45 days. And then right here, it's going to say that the buyer's broker compensation will be, and then, 3% with this check mark here of the gross purchase price. The seller will have to sign this and the buyer broker will have to sign this, right? This is an agreement that the seller is going to compensate the buyer broker 3% of the gross purchase price. This is the compensation agreement that's going to be sent to you with the offer that you need to then give it to your seller so they can sign it. All right. Same thing goes with the compensation agreement for the tenant. It's pretty much saying that the owner landlord will compensate the tenant broker half month, right? Uh, During the transaction. All right. There's one last form that I want to show you guys that you need to prepare for, and that is the lead base. So the lead-based disclosure, if the property was built in 1978 or prior to 1978, you're going to need a lead-based paint disclosure. Maybe that lead-based paint disclosure will be sent to you by the buyer, all right? Or you're going to have to produce a lead-based paint disclosure. Now I'm going to go ahead and add it from the blank forms. Let's just go ahead and open up blank forms. Come over here, type in lead. All right, search for it. And it's the lead-based paint disclosure, which is this one right here. And we're going to add it to the transaction. And I'm going to come here and show it to you. Where is it? Right here. Let's open it. So in this situation, all we need is going to be the buyer's initials and the seller's initials. And then right here, all right, the seller's disclosure says here, known lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards are present in the housing, or the second option for letter A, seller has no knowledge of the lead base. That's usually what you're going to see, the second option. And then for letter B, all right, seller has provided the buyer with all available records and reports pertaining to the lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the housing. Or seller has no reports or records pertaining to the lead-based paint or any hazards in the housing. So you're probably going to also see the second option in letter B. The sellers will initial letter A and B. Buyer's acknowledgement, right? So the buyer's going to initial here, 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 and then you, as the agent, will initial down here where it says licensee's acknowledgement. All right. The sellers will sign here, the buyers will sign here, the listing agent will sign here, and the buyer's agent will sign here. This is your lead-based paint disclosure. It must be produced and signed by both parties, by all the parties actually, sellers, buyers, and all the agents working the transaction. If the house was built in 1978 or prior to 1978. If the house was built in the year 2000, then there's no need for this form at all. Okay. Any questions on the lead-based paint disclosure? All right, guys, you've been excellent. I don't know. I mean, no questions at all. That means that we're watching, we're taking notes, and we understand it. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, if there's no
Yes, Robert. No, I've snapshotted.
all right.
Yeah.
And snapshotting. All right. That's cool. That's cool. Remember that I'm going to upload this to our YouTube channel. So just give me about an hour. You'll see this video inside of the YouTube channel along with all the other videos that we post. You'll see them on the YouTube channel. So um, if there are no other questions, that's pretty much the class for today. All
Yeah.
right. Go ahead.
I just have a question. Are you going to be there in the next hour?
Where's there?
I mean, at the
Call
Coral
me.
Gables.
Call me. Call me as
Okay.
soon as we're done here. Remember, we're recording this session. All right. So yeah, call me and I'll let you know. I'll call you right after we're done. All right, guys. So once again, if there are no other questions, we're gonna go ahead and end our program today. So thank you so much for taking the time to take this training, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.